Alright, in this video I'm going to tell you exactly how to use Elif in Python and how to use them in combination with if statements. Should you use Elif? Should you not use Elif? When you should use it and when you should not use it. I also have an article where I explain in detail about this topic. I give you real examples from my own experience working as a Python developer on this exact topic, when I would recommend you to use Elif and when I would not recommend you to use Elif. So you can find an article down in the description where I explain this topic in detail. But yeah, let's get into the video. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that in Python from coding perspective. So let's talk about, should you use Elif in Python? And the short answer is yes, you should use Elif in Python. And let's talk about the situations when you should use Elif in Python. Basically, when it comes to if statements and Elif, especially Elif, I want to talk about Elif in this video. Basically, you want to use Elif to test multiple conditions. And maybe it's not obvious when exactly to do that. So let's talk about that. And you might have seen else if in some other languages and wondered, what is Elif in Python? So Elif basically is the same thing as else if in some other languages like JavaScript. And when it comes to if statements in Python, if you combine if with Elif, you basically can have multiple conditions. And a simple version of demonstrating that would be, let's say you have condition 1 true, condition 2 true. Let's say the first one is false, but you want to work on the second one. So a very simple like if statement with this would be if condition 1 execute code block 1, then Elif, which would be the same as else if, you would do condition 2 execute code block 2, or in any other case you can also add more elifs here, but in any other case it would be else, and then you just execute code block and whatever. So this would be a very simple example of how this works. And if we would just print out each part, you'd be able to see which one is executed at which point. Let's start with the first one. Let's say both conditions are true. What will happen? We execute code block 1, because if the first condition is true, we right away execute the first part. We never even reach the second condition. Let's say if the first one is false, but the second one is true, we execute code block 2, this one. Because the first one was false, we never even got here, we never got to this point. The if statement goes to the second Elif, like not the second Elif, but just the first Elif, and checks the condition 2, and this is true now. Now we execute this one. So it's logically. And what would happen if we would have both of these conditions false? You would get the else statement. So that's a very simple understanding of if statements, but it can get a bit more complicated. So let's talk about other parts. So at this point you might wonder if this Elif is actually necessary. Maybe you think, okay, I can do condition 1, let's say execute code block 1, and then you can just do else, and let's say execute code block else. And you could also do, like, you could combine, you could have two separate if statements, but just use else. Why would you need to use Elif? That's the question that you might have. But the reality is that When you use Elif, it's a simplified version. In most cases, you don't want to have two separate if statements, you rather want to have one. Another case when else is not useful is when you need just if and Elif. This is from a real project that I'm working on from Views PY. Here you can see how if and Elif is used together without else. And this is one of the examples when you don't really need to have an else statement, like else condition. You just use if not user found, you do something, Elif another condition, which would be the second condition. From previous example, you do something like Elif not user can access wizard. So on this condition you do something, but you don't really need to have else. And it would not work if you just simply do if condition something. This would not work in this case because you need two specific conditions. But if you use just simply else, you're handling all the other conditions besides the first one, and it would cause unexpected situations. That's why Elif is necessary in this case, and it's necessary in Python sometimes. Can't just get away with else. How else you would use Elif? Well, another example is that you can just add as many Elif statements as you want. So let's say I have condition 3. These would all change to 3, 4, 4, and so on and so forth. And basically you can add as many Elif statements as you want and have as many Elif conditions as you want. What I didn't add here is condition 3 and condition 4, but I think this should be obvious that the condition 3 is going to be executed only if condition 1 and condition 2 is false. And the same goes for code block 4, which is condition 4 is going to be only executed if condition 1, condition 2, and 3 is false. And it repeats like that until infinity, as many conditions you have. That's the pattern that you follow here. Alright, so to give you a very simple example, what we can do is we can look at this simple number example. So you can do Python Elif, and the number is between 10 and 12. Number is 10, and you can see that we have condition 1, condition 2. If this is true, this whole statement, then this section will be printed. If this is true, then this section will be printed. And it's very simple, and it's based on this number. And let's say I would increase or decrease, let's say 5, what would happen? So we get this section between 0 and 10. Let's say increase to 15, 10 and 20. And let's say we do 21. The number is greater than 20. Is 20 or greater than 20. And let's say we do 19. We go back into that bracket. So this is how you can build a bit more complicated logic in Python based on these if and elif statements. Can we use if instead of elif? And of course you can, and there are many situations when you don't need to have elif and you don't even need to have else, and then you can just simply do if something, then the condition goes here, and then you do something, and you can just skip adding elif or else statements, else parts. You don't need that. And this is from a real project that I'm working on. This is one of the endpoints for forcing a login in staging environment. If we go back to if and elif topic, one misconception is that if you are using elif, it's faster than using if, but it's not really true. You can use if alone, or you can use elif. It's gonna be the same thing in both cases. It's just that about the preference. Do you want keep everything in one if statement, or do you want to separate things? But in general, what I would suggest, you try to keep your conditions in a single if statement unless you need to separate them for some kind of specific reason. So for example, there is no reason for me to do this. It doesn't make sense. But there is reason for me to keep everything in a one if statement and use Elif. That makes sense. Basically, if you're using Elif, it's just gonna make your code more readable. If we look at this section, it would not make sense to separate these parts like in separate if statements. It would make sense to just do conditions here, like if condition, this would be the first condition, applicant type individual, Elif applicant type company, then you do something based on that. But yeah, here we're just using a different model. And the else case would be value error. So this makes sense. It wouldn't make sense to do this. It kind of makes the whole thing, yeah, this would be how I would change this part. It would be if not, and if not individual and not company, then I would raise the error. This is how I could separate the if statement from how it was and do the same thing, basically write the same logic, but this doesn't look as good as just having everything in a one if statement and logically separated using Elif statements. Of course, this works the same way, but this is way less readable for other developers that you're working with. So that's why Elif makes sense and it makes the code more readable. Let me change this back. So this is a better solution using the Elif instead of just separating everything. Another benefit is you have more control flow when you're using Elif. So you can see here, I'm handling the first condition here using if, and then in Elif, I have another condition, another like logical way that I decide what I'm going to do just with Elif. So this also lets you write more readable code and more control the flow of how your application is going to work. One more quick example here is you can see again how Elif is used. If you have different targets, you can just do a different action based on different target using Elif, and you can do as many as you need. In this case, we're handling company, wizard, feed purchase, feed payment, feed payout, and then any other case we just do else. And this is way more readable than if you would do like each condition in an if statement just alone. So that's why Elif is very useful. Sometimes you're working on these if statements. For some reason, you just don't want to do anything on this if statement. What you can do to temporarily ignore this part is you can use pass keyword. So if I run this code now, it still executes, but on the first condition, nothing is going to happen. So let's say you have a number -5 and you just want to ignore and do nothing, then you can use pass and you can see that nothing is going to happen on this condition. You kind of can have this condition for some reason here, but let's say you temporarily don't want to do anything on it, you can use pass keyword. If I would not use the pass keyword, I believe this is not going to work and this is going to give me an error. Indentation error, expected something, statement to line 33. So you can see how pass keyword is useful here. All right, that's pretty much it. That's how you can use Elif in Python. That's all the situations that I know from my own experience. And if you actually want to become a Python developer and you're struggling with all the steps that you need to take, you don't know exactly what kind of projects to build for your portfolio, you can find my contact details below. Send me a message, send me an email, tell me about your situation, and I will look at it, and if I see a potential in you, we might be able to have a call, and I might be able to help you out with all the steps that you need to take in this process. So look for my contact details below.